This podcast could potentially have adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly the possibility of sexual content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing Valerie Willis. And our guest today is oh my gosh, we're so lucky to have her on, Eskay Kabba. Woo! With sexy men in the background. And if you have to watch YouTube.
I brought my friends with me in case you wanted
They're
to.
Adorable.
Jamal and Kenan.
Okay. So I actually, we're going to talk about what we're drinking. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps us with ratings and stuff. Okay. So I actually found this glass. I love it. It's from the Green Dragon Pub it's out from Alexandria, Virginia. But this weekend was at a wedding and I don't know why I hadn't thought of this before, but we're in Tennessee. So we went to the Old Tennessee Whiskey Company and I got the moonshine cherries.
Ooh.
And I mixed it with limeade. So I made cherry limeade, but with moonshine cherries.
I love it.
And a little bit of Sprite, like a boss. So I'm going to be unconscious soon. It's good.
Can I continue with the dragon theme?
Yeah, with the dragon theme.
Yeah. What I'm drinking.
Oh, Pacific Rim. Oh, I love that. 70% organic.
So,
nailed it.
First time I had it, I was in Oregon actually, and I like sweet wines. I don't like wines that are too dry, and I forgot someone else had brought it, and I was like, "This is the bomb." So I literally came back here and I went through all the wine and spirits in all of the Philadelphia area to find this exact one. It just changed the cover. Look, I have two of them next to me because it just changed the cover.
She's throwing wine at us.
I'm not drunk yet, I promise.
I was gonna say, how much have you had? Oh my gosh, yeah.
This was the original cover, and then they just recently put this nice dragon on the cover. So,
by the way, that is literally my favorite wine. I joke about it on this podcast all the time because it's 70% organic,
the last one.
And it makes me laugh. Like the label at Publix here says 70% organic, and I keep wondering what the other 30% is. It's probably flash chips and broken dreams. Who the hell knows what else is in there? Val, what are you drinking?
Koppaberg, which is one of my favorite cider companies.
Cool.
I got excited because they have a mixed fruit tropical. It is absolutely glorious. I already drunk the 4-pack of strawberry lime, which is my favorite flavor from them. So here's to whatever this ends up being at the end of this podcast.
Oh, that's just going to end badly. I can already tell you.
Such a lightweight.
So knowing that now, Eskay, why don't you tell this lovely audience what you write?
So I am, what do I write? I am an erotic romance writer. I specialize in gay male romance. So most of my characters are, gay men. And, but I do write, some, I call them straight stories, but I always say even within my straight stories, there's always at least a bi element to it, just because.
That's very, so what made you decide to go down that path? Nothing, just curious, because a lot of, it's amazing to me the amount of people who write male that are female writers.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So here's my story.
I love stories.
Yes.
I've always written, things here and there, and you get older, you start, adulting and doing daytime stuff, and you forget, how to do some writing a little bit. But I'm also an avid reader. So my secret is that I actually dreamed up a romance between, I'm not kidding, Charlie Weasley from Harry Potter. It's out there. I'll give you the link.
Yes, no, you're sending me this link like
I am sending you this
immediately,
link.
but continue.
And yeah, so this story was in my head, and I am the kind of person that if a story falls into my head, it won't let me go until I write it down. And so I started there, writing this love story between Charlie Weasley and this ranger that, you know, was rangering. I don't know if that's a word. Right outside.
It can be now. We just made it a word.
I just coined it, rangering. Right outside of the Dragon Reserve where he works. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's a Harry Potter reference. So, so I dreamed up this story and then I started writing it, and I didn't realize how erotic it was going to become, but it did, because, you know, I kind of said to myself, listen, if I'm going to write it, I'm not going to be black. I'm just going to throw it all out there. And so I did. And when it took me a couple of years. And so when I finally finished it, I was like, I want to do more of this. And so from there it became the spinoff of Jack's story, which is also out there. Jack and Ethan's story, Bittersweet Irish Cream. And then Connor's story came from that because Connor and Jack grew up together. And then it just kept going from there, you know. So that's how that trajectory of MM romance just kind of continues. But then I started writing just other stories. So I've been on Literotica for, I don't know, maybe since 2020. I've actually been on there longer than that, but actually writing stories on Literotica was in the beginning of 2020. And I just, yeah, I have stories that are in kind of the, you know, regular erotic. I have group sex stories, you know, it's just, it's something that I just like to do. And, you know, I am on Literotica, I say that, you know, I have a respectable day job. And that's why I have a pen name. And it's really interesting that, you know, people that know me are like, you write that? But I do, and I love it. I love it.
I think that's fantastic. First of all, I do need to know where that story is, but me and Harry Potter are besties. But not a fan of J.K. Rowling's bullshit. No. I'm just going to throw that out there. But
no, none of us
I separate the two situations because otherwise I'd just have to kill her. You know what I mean? Well,
and, you know, just so everyone knows, how I've learned to separate it is because when all the other you know, artists came out, the other actors came out against, you know, J.K. Rowling's words, especially Daniel Radcliffe, I said, okay, I can still love the magic that these people created, you know, that doesn't necessarily, it has anything to do with her anymore. It beyond her, because, you know, without Daniel Radcliffe's acting, there would be no, you know, Harry Potter. So I like to say that Harry Potter saved Harry Potter. And
I agree 100%. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, and members of my family in that one, is just, it's something where, you know, it's kind of like, what is his name? Wrote Ender's Game, Orson Scott Card. So Ender's Game is literally one of my favorite books. I love that book. I think it's incredibly well written. It's a great story. Orson Scott Card is a terrible person. And I just, you know, because Orson Scott Card was out when authors didn't really talk a lot to people. They didn't have social media. They didn't have methods of some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth, which is not okay by any stretch of the imagination. But it's such a different time when you have somebody who writes this and writes Dumbledore being gay and all these other things, and then comes out and you got to go, okay, somebody take her phone away from her. Like, I don't know what happened there, but just take her phone. And I felt like for a moment, a PR firm did get a hold of her and start talking some sense into her. And then I felt like something happened. I don't know what happened there. But I was like, you stopped listening to your PR firm. Cool, cool.
You did. And just kind of went off on our own tangent. But sidebar, since we're already kind of talking about this, have you read All the Young Dudes?
No.
Oh, so it's a wolf star. Do you know what a wolf star is? The
No.
Wolf Star is a fanfic of, yes, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. So there's a couple of
Oh.
wolf
I
stars.
just got chills.
Still. So I'm just gonna tell you to Google all the young dudes, Wolf Star. And it's out there for free because the person who initially did it obviously doesn't want to get sued by Warner Brothers. It's actually on Goodreads too. And it's freaking amazing. Everyone who's read it has said, this is canon. Like, this is what happens. It's basically the story of the Marauders. So it's James, it's Peter, Sirius, and Remus, and just how they went in Hogwarts all the way through to the war and James passing away. Yeah, it's so good. And Sirius going to jail. I mean, it's 188 chapters. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to absolutely have to find that. I love that we sidebarred our sidebar. We sidebarred the sidebar.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
What is the first thing that you published? Was it the Harry Potter story was the first thing you actually published, fiction-wise?
Fiction-wise, it actually was not that. The first thing that I published was a Jack and Ethan story, and it's called Bittersweet Irish Cream, and it's on Literotica. And that was, again, one of the stories that, this is back when I wish I had like all my notebooks. This is back when I had like spiral notebooks, and I literally have like 8 spiral notebooks of this story, because I would literally I would get carpal tunnel because the story would just come in, and I would just keep writing. It didn't matter where I was. I was one of those people that just kind of like walked around with the spiral notebook. And so I put it out there, and I said, I wonder if people like it. People freaking love it. It's so amazing. Jack's story, I don't even know how to like start it. So it's funny because it's Jack and Ethan's story, and just kind of their love story. But Jack is the one with the crazy past in terms of, his parents were murdered, and he's living with his aunt and his uncle in this small town. And Ethan comes to town with his son, and they start this love affair. But what's behind everything is that Jack has been essentially training his entire life to, have revenge on the people that have, killed his parents. And so when the opportunity presents itself, him and Ethan get into this like crazy fight over it. And Jack ends up leaving. He goes to Ireland because it's what he's wanted to do since he was 10 years old. You understand? So, Jack had to make a choice between, avenging his family or creating the family that he's had with Ethan and Ethan's son. And, people just love it. And so I threw out the first part, which was about, I don't know, maybe 90,000 words. And people were like, you have more, right? And so I said, okay. So then I created like a part 2, which was like, aftermath of when Jack comes back, and, that whole relationship piece. And they end up getting married, and people like, okay, so then what happens next? So it's a story that just keeps evolving in my head, and it's out there for free, and I threw it out there. They will probably always be out there for free, just because it's just one of those stories that I don't know. I feel like it just needs to be shared with the world. But in writing all of these extra stories about Jack, Connor's like way in the background of the story because, he's someone that's in the town. Connor's story just came out of nowhere, out of a simple conversation he had with Jack about, hey, I'm seeing this guy, and no one knows that Connor's gay except Jack and a few friends, because Connor and Jack dated when they were like, teens or whatever. And so Jack is, encouraging him to like, do this. Like, this is amazing, So it's really like it's a couple of lines in Jack's story. This is what happens to me. It's a couple of lines in Jack's story, and couple of days later, I was like, I think I'm gonna expand on it a little bit. And then it just became another, 120 word thing that I
Majesty.
put together. And I was like, and I don't know what it was about this particular story, but I kept saying, okay, this story needs to come out. I don't know why it does, but it just does. It has a lot more themes. Jack's story has themes in it, yes, but Connor and Jamel's story has just a little bit more, with Connor's, racist and homophobic family, the whole idea of, him still being in a closet at, 25, 26 years old, and him just kind of like struggling with that. And, and Connor's a bit of a brat. I mean, I've gotten comments about, how people don't like Connor. And I'm like, you're not wrong. He really is a pain in the ass and he's a brat. And Jamel probably should have left his ass, which, here goes my other sidebar. My crazy self started writing the first book from Jamel's perspective. And yeah, Jamel probably should have left his ass a long time ago. and Jamel thinks it more than once, like, this is too much work.
Well, okay, let's take another sidebar. I think we're on sidebar number 8.
Let's do that.
I read like my guilty pleasure is reading paranormal romance and different romance stories and male romance stories and stuff like that. And I think most of the time they should not be together. Like there is stuff happening that the other person does that really should be red flags and unforgivable. But part of, I think, what we all like about these stories is as much as we go, this is a horrible pairing, right? Like this is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's not how the stories tend to go, you know what I mean? Or that we don't enjoy the end result of all that tension and upset and figuring out how they get past that. Because we would hope in our lives that we'd be smart enough, but most of us are not. Most of us have had these relationships too, where we've just sat there for however the blank long, fuck long, that we're like, God, why the fuck did I stay? This is terrible. But if you were reading this in a book, and then Erica, blah, 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 people would be like, oh, I don't like Bob, but, I love this story.
Yeah.
I'm like, I fucking hate Bob. Why did I stay with Bob? I think that's true. And it's funny because I'm sure
it's real life sometimes. Like you get into these situations and, you're like, what? Sometimes, look, you look at your own partner and you're like, how the hell did I end up with this one? Like, like sometimes it's just like that. Like, it's people think that relationships are supposed to be this is, someone told me this before and I thought they were crazy, but I'm not kidding. Disney has ruined us. Like we think they're supposed to be these fairy tale, Prince Charmings and these princesses and everybody loves each other and everyone's happy. And that's not real life. Real life is, relationships are tough. And bringing personalities together and, really figuring out if love really is enough. I mean, that's real life. And I think one of the comments that I do get often from a lot of readers is that if there's some unrealistic things, like, some of the stuff that Jack did is like, okay, like how did he not get caught? But for the most part, they're like this is real. Like I can see myself in this situation. Or, I remember the first time when I read my story to one of my best friends, who is a gay male, and he had said to me, I'm Connor. It just made me laugh so hard. Like,
well, and the truth is, you said something that I think I agree 100%. Disney, I think fairy tales that don't have realistic, like you go back to Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales and those kind of fairy tales had a lot of more realism as to what it would be like to get through the difficulty. And I think that, I find this often in relationships, even, I'm going to be 50 next year, but talking to people, they forget that once you're in the relationship, you have to work at the relationship.
Right.
Like they think you're in it, then everybody's happy and everything's smooth sailing and you're in it. And I'm like,
You're going to say something that you mean one way and they're going to take it another way. And then you got to figure out, how do you reconcile a thing that you didn't mean?
Right.
It spirals and it mimics, and that's another thing I talk about with people all the time. Like, I write paranormal romance. All my creatures are mortal, powerful, but they're horribly flawed. And one of the characters, I think it's like in book 3, he goes, even immortals are not immune from the ailments of man, which kind of says that heartbreak, grieving, fucking up a relationship, mourning someone who they've lost, those are still very, very important aspects, even in a more supernatural telling. And you get to really draw your audience in because you have a more contemporary real world setting. Even what made you choose like that contemporary setting over fantasy, or is it just how it fell from there? Because you even said you started with that fan fiction of Harry Potter. You went from a magical world to full-on contemporary almost.
Yeah. So Jack's secret is no one knows that technically Jack is a wizard, but no one knows that. because when I pulled Jack and Ethan's story, because Jack was an old lover of Chris, who's with Charlie, Chris didn't know that Jack is
Jack's
technically a wizard from Ireland.
You're a wizard, Jack.
Yeah, but when I pulled it into the real world, it was like, oh, this is more. So fantasy is actually more difficult for me. I can sit in one setting and do 3 pages of detailed erotica. I'm not kidding. Fantasy is difficult. So when I pulled it from there, it was easier than what I thought, and that story just kind of flowed a lot better. But I'm sticking my toes back into fantasy again, in 2 different ways. So I've been trying forever to change that fanfic into a different kind of magical world. Obviously, I don't want to get sued by Warner Brothers. But from there, I've also created a YA story of Charlie's children, twin girls, who also have magic. And that's what I did for my first NaNoWriMo, in case anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about. I did that maybe 2 years ago, and it came out pretty good, but it's nowhere near polished. But I've been trying to expand my writing a little bit to kind of do a little bit more fantasy. I've also had this werewolf erotica story that I've been playing around with. And I finally
who you're telling all this to, right? These words are coming out of your mouth.
Where is it?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm trying to I'm biting my tongue.
That werewolf thing you mentioned.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's cool. Where is it?
Where is it? Right? Yeah, I've been playing around with that a little bit. That's a story that's been in my head for a while after I read someone else's werewolf erotica story. And some of the background characters, I always look at background characters for some reason, but some of the background characters kind of appealed to me. And I was like, I wonder if those 2 background characters would ever get together. And then I kind of created a story in my head around it. And then I just started writing it recently. So that's nowhere near finished. Shout out to 4 Horsemen
caveat. We heard everything up until the last thing you just said. So it's fine. We're moving on. We heard that story is almost ready. That's what we heard here. On this
okay,
topic.
sure. 2023.
Oh my goodness. Well, what's interesting is you talked about fantasy, and then we're going to have to take a break as soon as we are done with this sidebar of a sidebar. But, you talked about writing fantasy, and I think the main difference with writing fantasy is you literally have to sit down and go, cool, how does the magic work?
Yes.
How do the creatures work? Because so many people have elves in their realm. It's almost pretty much unanimously agreed in a lot of high fantasy kind of stories, like elves work this way, okay, but they don't have to. They can be house elves, they can be
Right.
this way, they can be short little things. It's almost like you do the world building and then take your story and shove it into the world once you've laid out how it works. And
Yeah.
this is from my moonshine advice chair that I'm giving all this radical information. But no, it's from talking to so many authors that talk about shifting, especially out of contemporary realms. Like I already know, because I write humorous erotica, and it's contemporary humorous erotica. Like it's real world, it's this, there's nothing, you know, fantastical except for some of the penis sizes, you know, like besides that, that's, I do that because, and I write horror, and I can write a little bit of fantasy, a little magic in the horror, a little paranormal in the horror that I write. But my horror and stuff, I very intentionally, because I don't want to do, and I don't want to do all the world building. Like I'm going to talk about how this serial killer has killed 45 people a certain way, but I'm not going to do all the world building with that. But I think somebody, especially with how you're saying these stories kind of evolve to you, it's almost like you sit down and draw out a map and go, this is my world, and add to it, and then go, now I'm going to write this story, because you have all the rules that you're writing by.
Right. And you know, when I started Charlie Weasley's story, some of that world was already there. I mean, it wasn't really the whole world of the dragon reserve there, but I literally, I'm not kidding. I need to bring a notebook. Like I drew out a map of the forest and like where the dragon reserve was, like in relation to like where everything else is, and how they just kind of came together accidentally because one of the dragons escaped and almost killed Chris, and then, you know, Charlie showed up and saved him, and then Charlie tried to obliviate him, but found out he really liked him, so he didn't do it, and then they started this whole like romance. Anyway, I
love all of this.
I like created this. Did you like that, Valerie?
Yes, I like beautiful synopsis.
I like created this world that was there, and it's funny because I don't like loopholes. I don't like someone to eventually say, but that doesn't work because such and such. And that's how my mind thinks. And then I'm still there, and I'm trying to, you know, plug in these loopholes. This is why it's so hard for me, because I think you're right. It's that world building that's like, oh, I have to create this world first and then put my characters in this world. And that's
I think as a fantasy, and I mean, Val can talk to this more, and we're gonna take a break and come back to it. And so you're not talking about it now, Val. You're gonna talk when we come back from the break.
Come back. Okay.
But I think when I'm reading high fantasy and I'm reading, you know, any stuff like that, and I read so much of it growing up, that was my go-to, right? Was when authors did not lay out the rules, and you could read that they did not think through something they put in the book on how it works. Now, it's not horrible. Being an author now, we all go through these things. But now more than ever, I go, okay, if you're going to do this, you create a rule, and you can bend the rules sometimes, but create the rule, and this is how it works in your world. Right. So maybe people don't fly from wings, they fly from pushing air under their feet, and that's how they fly, and they learn how to master pushing air under their feet. Yeah. But if you suddenly then go, well, then there's wings too. Well, now you need to build in why the hell are there wings suddenly, right? Instead of it just being a plot device for you to move on. Because I think when it comes to stuff, it can throw you out. But you could go, it's air under your feet, and everyone will be totally fine with that as long as that rule exists and that you're putting it there, and you're not like, well, sometimes they fly because, you know, they put their hands to the ground like Iron Man. Well, eventually people will be like, this doesn't make any sense.
This is not working. Yeah.
So. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And I told you not to open your mouth, Val.
I'm biting my tongue now.
We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family-owned, brewing small batch grain-to-bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers Spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, we're back. Before
back.
Val forgets the dissertation on world peace she was about to give us on the fantasy realms. You may want to pick that glass up again, Eskay. I'm just warning you in advance. I am too. Okay, there you go, Val. Do it.
Way to put me on the spot. Jeez. No, when it comes to fantasy and science fiction and some of the worlds that people create, you kind of have to build a Bible, right? But it doesn't mean you can't change the rules or provide loopholes on purpose for plot devices. You just have to know exactly why, and it better have a good explanation and backing and pull over. So like, for instance, like when you first start off in my Cedric series, there's this rule that they can't harm each other or they'll get cursed threefold, a similar fate, right? And then you realize as the story progresses that we have a character who's eating other ones and isn't getting kicked back. And you're like, what is going on? And as the story progresses, you find out because he's created by the very goddess who created the rule on a select few.
Okay.
He's bypass, right? And then you
I like that. I like that loophole.
So you start with like a small group and the group has to play by certain rules. And then as you start, the camera starts to zoom out as the series goes, you realize they're the only ones under this certain type of magic, right? And then you can break it down and adjust it accordingly. So there's different ways you can do it, but that's like one of the ways that I like to do it and that I've seen successfully done even in Full Metal Alchemist. They do the same thing where you think this magic is only local to them. And then as it spans out, they find out they're just using a really strange limited version.
Got it.
And they're not even using the full effect of what they could have been doing. So it's always interesting. So, but you just have to know how you're going to break the rules, because I think once you get comfortable with breaking and making rules in confidence, it can make a real game changer for any fantasy paranormal writer out there. So there's my lecture.
No, it's good advice. I think I like I said, I've been trying to change the story for a while, and I need to pull it completely out of the magical world that it's in right now and create my own magical world. And there are rules. There just has to be, rules that make sense. And it's stumping me a little bit, but eventually they'll get there.
And they can be similar rules. It's not plagiarizing. I mean, people have used wands since Merlin. I almost said
so that's what
and that wasn't it.
So he's still a wizard.
Yeah, you can have wands, you can have whatever. Like there are so many different kinds of wizards that you can have. And I think that from what just, even hearing you talk about your stories, I think the moment you start, you'll probably hit this. We're actually publishing here shortly world building guides. Like that's actually something we're doing because we found authors, and I swear I wasn't setting you up for a plug. I just thought of that right now. But we're doing that because I found a lot of authors get stuck in the world, even if it's regardless of fantasy, paranormal, even normal romance or erotica things, like because a lot of erotica and romance stories start as the smart ones don't, I feel like, only focus on just two characters forever. They start to evolve into the other side characters, and some side characters are our favorite characters. Like I can tell you in the Laurel K. Hamilton, Anita Blake stories, the side characters are my favorite characters. I have many things I would like to say about Anita Blake at this moment in time, but like the side characters are my favorite. I talk about this a lot on the podcast, that somebody has the barista named Bob that they're always talking about, that they loved Bob, and you're like, who the hell is Bob? And then you have to go back in your work and go, oh, Bob's a plot device that I used so that the meet cute could happen, but everybody wants to know what happened to Bob. So I think a lot of people get stuck sometimes in the world building around their characters, even in real world settings. Like, how does it work? How do they do the meet cute? Like, what does this little small town of, Gina Showalter writes in a town called Strawberry Fields, I think's the name of the town. Like, she's got a sweet romance series. And see, I do read these for guilty pleasure. Anybody listening who doesn't think I actually do that, I say that all the time. But you can tell she laid out a map of the damn town, like where everything is, like where the hotels are, where stuff is. You got to do that. You got to build the world. So when you're talking about it, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I literally picked the town off the map when I started the story. I just said, okay, small town in the smallest state, Rhode Island. Okay, let me pick one of these rural areas. Okay, this looks good. Oh, sure, Rockville, Rhode Island. And I built the town. I did. I built the town. I built where Wincheck Pond is, which is a real place. And the farm and the inn and and then the neighboring towns. And just recently I took a road trip to Boston for the first time. And one of my friends that we went to go see lives in Rhode Island. And so I said to her, can we go to Rockville, like just to like see it? Because I want to know, like, am I like way off for what I'm thinking in terms of small town? So we never actually made it to Rockville because it was really late and it was really dark and we were going down this really windy road. And I knew the area was rural in general because, like I said, I literally just picked it off the map. But it was way too dark and it was, talk about paranormal. That was like a horror story waiting to happen. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to do this in the daytime. But we visited like all the neighboring towns. So, we went through the Allendale area of Providence where Jamel's from. And we went through West Warwick, which is where Jamel and Connor end up living in West Warwick. And so it was just so cool to like go past these areas that I've literally been writing about for years. And I was able to kind of like visit these areas. But it, just in terms of just building a town, like sometimes I'm amazed at my own creativity and I hate to like, boost myself up and,
no,
really.
Don't boost yourself.
You
I think
built
it's
an
like,
imaginary
I'm
town,
amazed at
accept
the
it, and
creativity
lie.
that comes out. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is actually work. This is actually coming together. This little town that I built and the people and I'm also a big fan of side characters. I mean, I feel like side characters are the meat of the whole story. I always say, like in Jack's story, Liam, his best friend, like I just adore Liam and just how, Liam just accepts all of Jack's crazy. And now that I'm writing a coming of age story with Jack and Connor, it's even more so there. Like Liam is just like, okay, Jack is like always punching people in the face, but his best friend is just always trying to keep him out of trouble, So, and then, in Connor's story, people have a love-hate relationship with Afia, but, the bottom line is Afia is who keeps Connor grounded, is who saves him from becoming, one of his family members, just racist and homophobic. Well, obviously not homophobic, but, just kind of a bigot in certain ways. And so, but even outside of that, I mean, so there's a character in Connor's story who literally just pops up whenever he pops up because he owns the only good bar in town, BJ. And, BJ is there when Connor comes out to his friends and he's like, dude, you could have told us this like years ago. What do you mean? And he's also there when his father finds out. And BJ is the one that comes out of nowhere and steps between Connor and his father and says, no, Staff Sergeant, this is not happening here, And so like, it's like these background characters are like the, what do you call, unsung heroes sometimes of these main characters and who they need to build them up. Like, they wouldn't be who they are without these side characters or background characters. And that's all part of creating that world and creating that story and, you know, building up some of their stories too. So anywho, I can go on and on.
No, it's your
Love it.
podcast. You can go on all you want. That's the cool part about being here. You can just keep talking and we can just sit here and drink.
Yeah,
we can drink and we
drink
know
to that.
things.
Don't test me.
Oh, trust me, I'm the least judgy person you will ever meet, unless it's Jane Austen or E.L. James.
It's not like Jane Austen.
I have a lot of
wait,
judgment
we
regarding.
don't like Jane Austen? Is that what happened?
She doesn't. I'm like, meh, I get it, but like it's not my jam. I'm more into, like I said, I'm more into the paranormal fantasy.
A lot of people love it. There's a lot of stuff like this is the thing I love about writing, truly, and being a reader. But writing and being a reader is this. All of us write on this particular podcast. We've all talked about, we all write different things, right? There are going to be people that absolutely, Eskay, love the hell out of your stuff, and they will not go anywhere near one of my horror stories in a million years. Like they won't. But then there are going to be the people that are huge horror fans that
Right.
are going to think both of the things you both write are foofy
Like
and
boring, right?
yeah. And they're like, we don't want kissy stuff. Why didn't somebody die more? You know, like I'm not saying people don't get killed in your books, Val. Don't start down a whole tangent, but I'm just saying they're not horror books. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and there are all kinds of different things. And that's what's great about being a reader and also being a writer is we have an audience that loves our stuff. And then there's the rest of the fucking world. Who cares about them, right? That we're not their thing. And the same with reading. I read so many different things. And I think a lot of us as readers in general do. Like, I love biographies. I think biographies are fantastic. I love true crime. At the same time, I love sweet romances at times and male romances and male high fantasy. Oh, I love that. That's one of my favorite things recently. And, you know, so all kinds of different things, paranormal, you know, and that's the great thing is that there's somebody out there writing books that will entertain us. And that's what we're doing too. We're writing books that are going to entertain people. And whether it's going to be everybody, no. And I think it's awesome. The amount that you've written is amazing. The amount Val's written is amazing. Like, it's amazing that you've had this great audience reaction to your things, even if they're like, Connor's, you know, but I'm telling you, there is a Connor fucking fan club out there that thinks
there is
the greatest character.
I used to get, I'm not kidding, I used to get anonymous emails from people that was, this is what made me like end up like, you know, like saying, okay, Connor's story needs to come out there. I used to get anonymous emails that would be like, I need more drunk Connor in my life, because when Connor drinks, he's a complete asshole. So like people are like, I need more drunk Connor in my life. Like Connor is like, you know, so I get these anonymous emails and they crack me up because I can't like respond to them. But yeah, even though, and in the same breath, then someone will write like on the page, you know, because you can comment after every chapter on Literati, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't stand Connor, you know, this and that and blah, blah, blah. And so I say to myself, is that the same person?
Probably not. You'd be amazed. Like, I think it's great when an author also hears how much somebody likes a particular character.
Oh yeah.
Because then you can take that character and do something so magical with it if you decide to, because it's got an audience. It's got the character itself has a fan club.
Yeah.
And they want to see more and want to see the journey. And maybe they just want to see him being a butthead all the time, which is fine too. But they might be the Connors of their relationship, or they may be in a relationship with the Connor and are like, this is
like,
this is
I can
my
relate to this. Yeah, definitely.
You know, that can absolutely be a thing. Val, I realize I've done a lot of talking, and you've been awfully quiet over there.
Well, it's because the mother-in-law's dog's barking in the background, and I don't know if you guys can hear it. So I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, that's why I kept making faces.
I just thought you were being paranoid and weird. I was not going to comment until we were off the podcast.
No. So a lot of people sometimes ask me, I want to get into writing, but I'm nervous and I don't know if anyone will like my story or the way I tell or the way I write. And I always recommend, I'm like, start with fan fiction. You know, go
Yep.
to a fan fiction site, start there, because there's nothing you don't write over there that can't be converted into your own world in some means or way. Because character development, dialogue, the way you tell a story, that's all you. You're just using a balancing board to help fill in the gaps that are a little more difficult, that takes being more confident in the other side before taking that deep dive. How impactful has lit erotica and fan fiction sites been? Because you talk, that's where you started, and it's not very often I get a chance to kind of say, hey, this is a prime example
Yeah.
of someone who took that chance, got some amazing feedback and response from readers. And you've talked a little bit about that, but I would love for you to expand, like, what made you finally take that brave step, the post on there, how hard of a decision was that?
Yeah.
And things like that.
So
it's
I'd
really
actually
12 questions at the same time.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
good.
Yeah, that's okay. I can answer all 12.
Okay.
I
I give her the mic for 1 minute, I swear.
Never again.
I was lurking on Literotica. I didn't have a I didn't sign in, because you can just read stories for free. You don't have to sign in. And so at first I would just kind of like read stories for free. Like, seriously, like I'd be in the dark with like my tablet and like reading these like, erotic stories. And then I started commenting anonymously on them. And I really celebrated, like, just kind of like other writers and stuff. What made me do it? I don't know. A bit of crazy. I'm also someone who I've never really been, that's not true. I've been afraid to throw myself out there, but I'm someone who is like, just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. And so I did that for probably about 6 months while I was writing Jack's story. And I ended up throwing something else out there. It was completely something different. It's like a short story kind of thing. And it got some reviews, and people liked it a little bit. And I was like, all right, I was gonna throw Jack's story out there and see what happens. And so the first story I wrote out, I threw the first chapter of Jack's story out there, and the first comment I got was, "This is stupid." I'm not kidding. That was the first comment I got. "This is stupid," and I was like, shit, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I didn't look at it again. And then I came back and had like 4 more comments that said, "This isn't stupid. This is a great start. This is an amazing start. Keep going." And I was like, okay. So then I started throwing other chapters out there. So, the thing about these sites, the like Literotica, Wattpad, what's the one that all the young dudes are on? I keep forgetting what that site's called, but that's another site where people just kind of like can write information, whatever stories they want to write on it. There's also a lot of encouragement out there. There's other writers out there that are encouraging other writers to say, hey, your work is good, do this. The first group sex story that I put on Literotica, and so I ended up doing it because it was in the middle of the pandemic and I was sent home. And so now I'm home with the laptop, and which is very dangerous for me. And so I started writing this group sex story about, this group of 3 people who just got quarantined for 2 weeks. And what are you gonna do with being stuck in a cabin for 2 weeks? And so when I started writing that, I put it out there, and I got a lot of good feedback. I also got a lot of interesting people telling me their group sex stories, so that was interesting. But I also had someone who said, like, your writing is really good and it needs to be proofread. Can I proofread it for you and put it back out there? And I was like, that's so freaking cool. People do that. And so, and then started kind of this relationship with this kind of this random person I probably will never meet. But the encouragement that happens on these stories, because everyone's kind of doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's also just kind of like putting themselves out there and seeing what the world does with it. And so I've gotten more positive feedback and constructive criticism from other writers that encouraged me to keep going. So I would say I agree with you. I think starting out small in, you know, one of the sites that allows you to write for free, I say just kind of just put your first thing out there and see the response that you get. Because you're right, not everyone's gonna like all of your stuff. Not everything on Literotica that's there is, you know, 5 stars. You know, that's okay. You know,
That's it.
And what you're saying can be very true, because one of the things I constantly talk about is that, you know, you have these stories that go up there, and I love that a proofreader reached out to you and said, hey, do you want me to proofread your stuff before it goes out? I think that's brilliant, because I also think the side effect is a lot of authors don't necessarily realize the steps when they do stuff like that. They're like putting their work out there, and not everybody reaches out to go, so you switched tenses like 10 times in this. So we're not sure also whether this is first, third, first again, you know, 12 people perspective. Like, we're not actually sure which perspective you're telling the story from. And I think it does give you practice for doing it. And it's kind of like having a little bit of a critique group that, you know, is out there kind of going, hey, fun story. This would be great. Or, you know, how, you know, anyway, basically, I think that it can be great. And it does give you that taste of the feedback on your story, as long as you're prepared to take it. Because that's the other thing.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
You got to remember that not every word we write is a golden snowflake.
Right. Yeah.
I wish it was. Sometimes it's like a drop of really dirty rainwater that nobody wants to touch with a little bit of twine.
I'm very much, I will admit, I even put like in my bio on Literotica, I am awful at proofreading my own stuff, because I see it in my head and I'll write it down, and, you know, fuck form and from. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and that's the iceberg of the story. We've got the entire thing and where they're coming from, and sometimes we forget to put all the words on the paper. Like,
exactly. You know, so
and I tell authors this all the time. Sometimes you can help yourself by like changing the font and the size of the font to something completely ridiculous and different, and then you can catch some of it. But even reading it, we already know where it's going. Like, I don't think we're good at reading our own.
We're not.
We're like, I already know where this is going.
Word has
right. Who cares if you miss an entire line?
Yeah. I use words read out loud feature, and
my husband does that. Yes.
And I'm like, wait, what did she say? What did she say? Like, that's not a sentence. That's just
like that's not a thing. Yeah,
that's not a thing. That's not how we say it.
I tease Val all the time. I'm like, those are just sounds. You're just making sounds. Those aren't even words. Like, they're just vowels. You put a bunch of vowels on the page. But I love your. So let's talk a little bit about the sexy series you have behind you.
Yeah. So,
because I know you have more than just behind you. So
I don't know if it's showing up backwards, but it's showing
up
backwards.
Correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hidden Love, like I said, it was birthed from Jack's 2 lines in Jack's story. Connor is a small town guy and went into the Marines. And when he came home from the Marines, he started dating men exclusively. And when I say dating, which you see in book 3, he'll tell everyone, dating is a bit of a stretch. It was more like having a lot of sexual relationships. And
that's benefits.
Lots of friends, I don't even want to call them friends. Lots of acquaintances.
I use the term friend very loosely in this.
And you know, on the surface, you know, people think that Connor has it all together. I mean, he comes from a great family. You know, no one really knows he's gay. They all think he's like dating his best friend, who basically has been covering for him literally since he was like 17 years old. And you know, he is the way he is for a lot of reasons. but it just kind of stems from a lot of trauma that he's been through growing up, a lot of trauma he's been through in the war, so by the time the story begins, he's 25 years old. He's sowing his royal oats out there. He's just he's not looking for anything but a good time. And Jamel is kind of the opposite. I mean, Jamel is 28, and he's also been home a couple of years. He's an Army vet. He's been home a couple of years, and he's really looking for something a little bit more meaningful. And when they meet initially, Connors really just wants to, have a good time with Jamel. But Jamel really forces him to want more for himself, than that. Like, want love and respect and appreciation and, all of the things that he doesn't really quite understand why Connor is not looking for those things. So, I mean, a lot of things come out, as to why Connor is the way he is. I talk about it in different ways, but, the bottom line is, he's still under the thumb of his father, who is abusive. And, book one, fun fact, Valerie probably always knows this, book one and book two was one story. And I had to break it up into two parts because it was this thing, because it was too long. And but that was hard for me to do that because the story flowed right into each other. It's over a 3-year span of them being together. And so being with Jamel, Connor grows up, and not just, in terms of relationships, but just in the way that he looks at things and the way he sees himself and the way he treats his friends. And, just he gains a sense of pride in himself and a sense of self-confidence that he just never thought that he would ever have, being told that you're shit the majority of your life kind of does that to you, so Jamel really, really changes him and helps him to grow up. And so one of the questions that I've gotten recently was, well, what the fuck does Connor do for Jamel? And to that I say, and this is partly why I started writing it from Jamel's perspective. When Jamel meets Connor, he's also intrigued by him, and it's a bit of a challenge, and he's kind of an alpha male himself, and he likes a bit of a challenge. You just to kind of see, okay, so how far can this relationship really go, if I put my all into it. And Connor shows up in ways for Jamel that Jamel has not really experienced before. Someone that really wants to be with him, because he's he's 6'5", he's fucking gorgeous. He's 6'5", you know what I mean? Or he's 6'3", dark chocolate, muscle bound. I mean, people look at Jamel and, they think he's about being a good time. And Jamel is kind of the opposite. He's kind of an introvert. He kind of just wants to just chill. And when he gets into relationships, and he makes it known that, no, I really do want a relationship, it's like, it doesn't pan out the safe way for him. But, Connor shows up for Jamel emotionally, and, mentally, and, the fact that he has, devoted all his time and attention, to Jamel and Jamel only, that it means the world to him. The fact that he's embraced his family the way that he has,
you're not allowed to give away anymore.
Okay, sorry.
I'm gonna cut you off. Stop giving away more.
Okay.
But how many books are out in this series? Inquiring minds want to know.
So when I wrote the series, it is, like I said, this was one. And then I wrote another one, which ends up being the last two books. And then I wrote one in the middle, like in what year is this? Jeez. 2020 in
22.
2021 is when I wrote the middle part. So it was 3, but technically now that I've expanded it, it's actually 5 books in the series, and they're already written. They're just coming out like every 5 to 6 months.
That's super exciting. What are we doing after that? Inquiring minds want to know.
Erica wants to know.
Well, so I do have another series. Haven't told Valerie this yet. I do have another series, another MM series that I wrote. The first book, but I have not sat down and wrote book 2. That's supposed to be another 3-part series, and it's completely different setting. It's a two people meet on a plane, going to London for different reasons. They end up sitting next to each other on a plane, and 7 hours is a long time on a red eye, and they get to know each other. Nick invites how did I forget my character's name?
I would like to introduce you to Pacific Rim. It's
right,
the one
right.
that keeps on giving.
Nick invites Brian back to his hotel just to say like, hey, have a place to stay for the month. I'm only here for, and Nick is a rich guy. He's like, I'm only here for a week. You can have the place for the month, and but of course the love story ensues from that. So that's another very interesting series that's gonna.
So what is the name of that series that's going to be coming out soon?
It is called A Plain and Simple Connection. With the play on the words plain. Yeah. And it's already copyrighted.
Note that
so I
down.
can say it out loud to anyone because they can't
Note
take
that down. Send an email immediately following this episode.
I have to throw that submission out to 4 Horsemen. But I've been so busy with, writing, getting these books out. I threw one of my free stories on A Love for Micah. It's a free story that's on Literotica, but I just packaged it and threw it on Amazon just to see what it would do. So that's out there. I'm still writing the 4th part of Jack's story. That's going to be out there next year. But the problem is, because Jack and Connor's story entwine so much, I can't put it out there before book 3 comes out, because the first part of part 4 for Jack's story starts after, a few years into Jack and Connor and Jamel's relationship. Because they become all friends. They become like, they hang out with each other. Jack and Ethan and Jamel and Connor. If you read book 2, they were, Connor is when Connor introduces Jack to Jamel, and the 4 of them just become like really good friends. So, and that
This
shows
is
in Jack's
exciting.
story. It is.
You've got so much stuff coming out.
So
So how do people stalk you on the interwebs?
You can stalk me at Eskay_Kabba_author on Instagram. I'm also, it's the same on Facebook. I've been told that I need to get a TikTok at some point. I loathe TikTok, but
Well, TikTok,
I have a good time.
You don't need it. I will just tell you the TikToking is a commitment. And I say that to all authors.
I know,
and not on it yet. You have to do the ticking and the talking daily, pretty much. So if you're not prepared to do the talking daily,
I don't know.
do it.
Ask me again in the spring. I don't know. Just, a little crazy.
Exactly.
And then you can always email it, sk.kabba@gmail.com. Like, people randomly email all the time. I got someone who read the book 2 on Booksprout as an art, literally emailed me and said, I just want you to know that I gasped, because I left you guys at a cliffhanger, that I gasped at the end of book 2. And I said, no, she did. Just like that. I crack it up. So
I love that feedback.
Telling me like about these stories. So, and if you email me, I will absolutely write you back, because I'm just that kind of person. Like, email me. and I'll write you back, and I'll include you in my newsletter. And so people in my newsletter get first dibs. I mean, in my newsletter, people saw the cover before it came out, and they got the first snippet before I put it out there. And they know some of the stories that I'm putting together before I tell anyone else. Some of these things that I'm telling you guys now, if you had my newsletter, you would know this already about this, upcoming werewolf story and stuff.
You would be
way to call everybody out on that one. Okay, well done.
Yeah. So yeah, join my newsletter and, keep in contact with me on Instagram and, promote my stuff. If you really feel like you're enjoying the work that I'm doing, throw a review on Amazon or Goodreads or Barnes and Nobles. Send me a message so I can put up an editorial review of some of the things that, you really like about it. Tell me that you hated book 2. I got one who told me, I hate book 2 because I felt like I really didn't understand. That was the one that was like, I didn't understand like why Connor and Jamel are together, because I feel like Connor is selfish and uses Jamel, and I'm so sick of it. And I was like, tell me how you really feel. And then we just kind of talked that through, and she's like, thanks for putting it all perspective for me. She still can't, I mean, literally, if you go on Amazon, she like wrote that review. And I love it. Like, I love it. And she's like, the writing is awesome, but I can't stand Connor. Cool. Like,
oh my God, I love every bit about that.
I love that so much. So yeah.
Eskay, you have been thoroughly amazing to have on this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
Absolutely.
I didn't get to finish it. Look, I didn't finish. Let me finish first. And now we're done.
That's what she thinks until literally.
Oh, you're saying that, but we have a whole other podcast to do. So that's how that's
Rapid fire questions after this, madam.
Oh,
That's
all
true.
right, fine. Let's get it done.
Okay, guys, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host has been Valerie Willis.
Hey,
Don't
guys.
forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. We would love to hear what you think. Eskay will absolutely comment back on anything you post on the YouTube or, any of the podcast channels. And we will see you guys next time.